Greetings. I wanted to talk today about the geometry editor in DAZ Studio. DAZ is not really a modeling tool. You're not going to create new models with it. But with the creation of primitives and then some judicious use of the geometry editor, you can actually create some useful little building blocks. For example, this background dome in a render that I did not too long ago was done by creating a sphere and deleting some of the faces with the geometry editor. And then another fairly important issue is normals and the direction they face. When you create a sphere in DAZ Studio, the normals are normally pointing out from the sphere. But here, since we've used it, or I've used it as background for this gynoid render that I did, I needed the normals to be pointing in. And why is that? Well, it's because, for example, the surfaces here, and by the way, with the geometry editor and reassigning faces, I was able to create these additional surfaces so I could have the different LED strips, their little borders around them, and so forth. And those are all set to a metallic material in LuxRender. And if you're not familiar with LuxRender's metallic material, if something hits the back face on a facet, you get a black void. It only renders the material from the front face, i.e. the direction of the normals. Additionally, emitters only emit in the direction of the normals. So when I made these surface zones or material zones to be LED strips that emit light, again, we need those to emit in towards the model, not out into the big void around everything, right? So I wanted to show how you can do this in the geometry editor, since things like flipping normals is something I think most people aren't aware DAZ Studio is capable of doing. And it can be very useful. It can also be used to fix older props. A lot of old props, especially V4, early V4 era, I've noticed will have problems with their geometry where some faces face in, some faces face out. And if you're again trying to set that to, for example, a metal material in Studio, then or sorry, rather in LuxRender, then when you render it, you get these black stripes on what should be a solid metal surface, and you're like, well, what's going on, and how could I fix that? Well, the way you can fix that is by selecting those faces and flipping their normals in Studio. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to clear this. So File, New. Give it a moment to clear out everything. And we're going to create a couple of primitives. So I'm going to create a new sphere, and we'll say that this guy is 10 centimeters, and this will be a target for us to have as our subject. Or maybe we'll make it half a meter up. Then, so that one we're not going to touch. It's just going to be our subject, and we'll make a camera and switch to the camera view. And whatever, doesn't matter. And so then I'm going to make another sphere. This time I'm going to say it's going to be like 2 meters, and we'll give it some additional faces so that we have more to edit with. Accept. And that is quite a bit bigger than the old one is. And so it's going to contain the guy that we're looking at. Now, first thing we want to do is get rid of the front half of this sphere, right? So a little trick for that is let's create a plane so that we know where exactly the world origin is. And then on this sphere, we're going to say, since we made it 2 meters in size, we split it down half. I'm going to switch to the geometry editor here. And so now, if I come down here, and then the other thing I will do is switch this to, sorry, just change this to wire shaded and we can see all of our faces, right? So it's really easy to select here, pivot under the plane, select here and here. And so basically what we know now is that we are we have the front faces of it. And so if I go and I say, grow selection and see that it lines up with our origin. Now we don't have all the stuff on the top, but that's fine. So we've selected a bunch of stuff here. And so now what I'm going to do is I can say geometry visibility. I can say hide selected. Then geometry editing, and I'm going to say delete hidden polygons. And yes, I'm sure. And so now we have the sphere, and we didn't cut off the top and bottom all the way, but for the purposes of this video, that's fine. I won't worry about that. And I'm going to revert this back up, or maybe minus 50, right? What does it look like from our camera view? Yeah, so that's fine. So that was one quick trick. You can easily delete faces with the geometry editor. One thing to be aware of is if you do that on figures that have morphs, DAZ doesn't really update the morphs right, and so when you reload the thing, it kind of explodes and the morphs won't work right. But since this is a sphere with no morphs, it's primitive, we can delete stuff as much as we like. And I also will do stuff like, for example, if we create a cone, and we'll switch to meters just to make it a lot easier to see, right? I will raise the cone up a little bit so it's easier to edit, right? And I'm going to say selection mode is marquee, and then I do this. And what that's done is it's gotten me all of the bottom faces of the cone, and visibility hide, and then editing again, delete hidden polygons, yes. And let's scale this cone down a bit, so we'll make it maybe 25. If we rotate it on X, what we've got here is a little cone that we could actually use as a light shooter, except that right now, all of the normals are again pointing out. And if we wanted to use this as sort of a shooter, It's not really exactly the greatest for simulating a point light or spotlight, but I could simply say select all, and then I'm going to say editing flip normals for selected polygons, and now all the normals are pointing in. So if I put this minus 90, and actually what we'll do is we'll say minus 45, no, so 45. And why, no, see, we'll move it back a little bit and over a little bit, scale it down some more, and we can raise it up. If we look in here, what we should be able to, so now we're going to have this little backlight, and we'll be able to see when we render that the light comes from inside rather than outside. And I'm going to do a similar thing for our sphere here. Well, actually, before I do that, I'm going to say render this, export only, and render frame. Whoops. Material. So our cone, we're going to say convert to light. And so now render frame. And what I want to show here is if I load up the sphere 2, in MeshLab, you can see MeshLab showing black on the back face and white on the front face. We can also go in here and say render show face normals. And so you can see that all the little spikes are shooting out, and that's not the direction that we need. And so I'm gonna remove that for the moment, and then also MeshLab didn't like that. If I make this material for sphere 2 be metal, and we'll say make that silver. And then the other thing I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to add a curved light in front so that we have and make these cone, and just for the sake of making it obvious that it's something different, we'll make it red, and we'll say render. So we can see we have our red. We don't see our sphere target, at least not yet. And we can see that the floor is reflecting, but that sphere is a big void. If you remember, that's because, well, actually you can start to see the sphere here from the red. Um, we're not seeing that background sphere because the normals are pointing outwards. And since we set it to the metal material, materials, right, sphere to metal. And as I pointed out in LuxRender, the backface of the metal material just kind of renders as a black void, right? You can tell actually now, here's the difference. You can see the our front light is lighting up the ground surface that we had. You can see, and then there's this edge of the void here with the sphere, right? So we'll shut that down. And so now we'll go back to our sphere, and just for real quick to make this a short video, I'm going to say select all, and then I'm going to say flip normals. And so now if I go render again, and I say render frame, yes. Change that to auto update every 30 seconds. And then the other thing I will do, Mesh Lab, open up Mesh Lab again. Documents, DAZ, reality, objects, sphere 2. So now you can see the white is on the inside and the black is on the outside. And if I say render face normals, you can see that now all those spikes are pointing in rather than out. Close that. And also if you look here, we can already see the inside of this sphere because the metal material is now being rendered correctly because the normals are facing in, which is what we need. And I'm going to close that. And then one other sort of quick how's it done type thing to speed things up as a quick tip when you're editing in the geometry editor. Switch back to the geometry editor. So say I wanted to make these two strips here be alternate material, right? I could select it and I could go, and that's kind of tedious when you have a long strip of faces, right? So here's a shortcut for you. If you double click on an edge, notice how I double clicked here on the side and it extended basically all the way around in as if I had done select connected, but only if I do select connected, it's going to pick everything because the mesh is all unified or welded or whatever you want to think of it as. But this is kind of like select connected in one direction, and then here is select connected in another direction. So if you're trying to pick out a strip of stuff real quick, and I could come over here and do the same thing, and then how many? 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, I had 10. 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So here and here. If you double click on the middle of the face, you get nothing. You just get that one face. And then alt click there, removed it. But so we've got these selected faces. I can say geometry assignment, create surface from selected, and we'll just demo. And so if you look in our sphere, we have the default surface, which is what was there to begin with, and then demo is these strips, right? So now if I go in here and I say reality, add materials, sphere 2, the demo, I will say convert to light, and we'll name this demo, and we'll make it green. And of course these powers are all off, but since they're separate light groups, we'll fix that as it's rendering. Yes. And we will set this back to 60 again. Zoom out. And here you can already see we've got the green for those strips that we made showing up as emitter because we made it into a light group. And if we had not flipped the normals, as you can see with the same thing with the cone, right? The inside of the cone needs a little, let's say 0.01. 0.01. If we hadn't flipped the normals on the cone, we would have the outside of the cone being the emitter rather than the inside of it. So nice little short video this time. Hope that was useful for some quick tricks that you can do with the geometry editor in Studio, and let me know if you have any questions. Cheers.